We spent about 8 years trying to get a solid diagnosis for Jonah, and we went from specialist to specialist to specialist, and every time the doctor would say, "Whoa, we've never seen a child like Jonah before. This is news to us," or he's unique, and we don't know how to explain his symptoms or how to give you any guidance on his development. And that went on for so long that we started to just give up, basically. And at one point, our pediatrician encouraged us, because the science had progressed, to go ahead and get a whole exome sequencing done. And it was at that point reasonably inexpensive that insurance would cover it in the United States. So we paid about $200, cost about $15,000. Insurance covered all of the rest, and we got our diagnosis about 6 months after they took the blood samples. And that was a very important finding for us.
We went also with our child from specialist to specialist, and each time they thought they had something and it was nothing. In October, November, we got a phone call that they found something with the Siem. It was FOXP1, but they didn't have any answers that we had for them, for the doctor. So we went on the internet on advice of our doctor from the clinical genetics department, and we came to RareConnect, and then we got a lot of information. Well, not as much as we should have, but it's a start.
Okay, Siem was seeing a lot of doctors, and then they sent us to the genetic hospital, and there a few tests, but the diagnosis wasn't found. And a year ago now, more than a year now, they make a new test. All the genes were testing, and just 10 children in Holland became the test, and Siem was one of them. And after 11 months, they find FOXP1 diagnosis. So
those 10 children, they hadn't found anything with those 10 children, and in Nijmegen they had a new test, and those 10 children were selected to get into this program, and Siem was one of them.
Yeah, we're very lucky.
Yeah. So now those 10, they were tested, and now another group of 10 children were tested, and another child with FOXP1 was found.
When we got the diagnosis, it was kind of surprising, because we'd been looking for so long, and to actually have a definitive diagnosis was kind of surprising. It took a while to just process that we actually knew what he had. But then there was no information that came with the diagnosis. It was just that there was a mutation in this gene. So Carl and I both have a background in science, so we did a lot of searching, and we still couldn't find very much information. So that was kind of frustrating, I think, after being excited to have a diagnosis. Then we didn't really have much more information. And I think we realized we were probably the experts in having a FOXP1 child. So, we were very kind of frustrated by the lack of information out there, but we read papers out there that there were other cases in the literature of children, so we knew there were other kids out there. It couldn't be super, super rare. So then we spent a lot of time kind of thinking, what could we do? And then I don't remember how we came upon RareConnect.
I was just trying to remember with Rob, and I guess you were just Google searching, and maybe you looked for NORD, the National Organization of Rare Diseases, or something like that, and you stumbled across eurordis, and then RareConnect. But I know you found it, so congratulations.
Because we figured, if we could find the other families, that maybe we could share information and learn that way.
We also were hoping to find families whose kids or the individuals were older than Jonah, so we could get a sense of what the prognosis was. You know, naturally, one question: okay, you get this diagnosis. What does it mean? And for something like FOXP1, which is recently discovered, when there's only 2 or 3 papers available with case reports, there's no information about what the future holds, and we were certainly hoping to get some insight. And that was one of the reasons we set up the website, was to try to meet up with families with older kids. There is a family that we also met through RareConnect, and their son is maybe 14 now. So not that much older. In the literature, there's one kid who's 21, or at the time of the paper, but they have not
Actually,
joined us.
Somebody has recently joined who has, I think, a son who's 21.
Okay.
But that was just like in the past month, I think they joined. So.
Well, our story is mostly the same as Carl and Annie's. At first we were frustrated. We had some answers and we didn't get any. But on advice of our doctor, we went to RareConnect, and we read all the stories of the people, and what Carl said. We were looking for people who are the same as Siem, but older, so we knew what lies ahead for us. But we've got a doctor in Maastricht who is very, very enthusiastic about this, and she had together with our pediatrician have a presentation, presentation about FOXP1, and she encouraged us to get in contact with other families. So she tried to get us in contact with the child who was diagnosed in the second round, but unfortunately they haven't got any contact with us yet. That's a girl from 15 years old, so we thought maybe we can get in contact, but I hope it's for the future. We had a very big period for processing. If I talk for myself, it was very long. Yeah, but
after the diagnosis, you were very surprised because for many years you hear that they didn't found the diagnosis, so you were a little bit more waiting. Yeah, I couldn't believe it that they have found it.
And we were talking last night that when our kids were little, a lot of people kept telling us, so don't worry about it, you know, because they could never find an answer. But I think, you know, we knew there was something not right, and when you finally had that answered, it was helpful. Yeah,
and now it's hopefully easier for paperwork for the
for like assistance.
When you need help, so that you have a name, that you maybe get more for your son.
That your son gets the right treatment and the right education that he needs.
We found when Jonah was younger, so Jonah was tested for autism and does not have autism because he's very social. He's very loving, he's very happy and interactive, so he's not autistic. And there's all these benefits you get from insurance if your child has autism. If you don't have autism, you don't get the benefits. So I think it's starting to become helpful to have a name for a bureaucrat to latch onto. FOXP1.
Not even that. Sometimes people would ask you, you know, and I'd never know what to say. I say, well, he's kind of like a child with autism. But now I say he has a rare genetic condition. It's easier.
That's easier.
And then mostly people stop talking.
The other thing I wanted to mention, you asked, what does it mean to get the diagnosis? Well, it was very important to know that there was something genetic and not some poison in the environment or something that we did wrong as parents. It was just bad luck.
For me, it was also, I have many years thought it was because of me in my pregnancy. Maybe I did something wrong, but I live very healthy. I couldn't think what was the problem, but now it's good to know, and for my other sons that they don't have it. Yeah. When we hear the diagnosis and the genetic doctor tell us about RareConnect, just in a couple of weeks we looked at the website, and then we read all the stories from the children. Then when we were thinking about the medication of Siem, does he need some other medication to be concentrating at school time? I was thinking there was one kid in America who seems very much the same as Siem in his behavior. I remember the story, so I looked, and then I read the story from Carl and Annie about Jonah, and it was almost the same history as we have had with Siem. So then we send an email, and then we make a nice contact on email and on Skype. So, and now they're on holiday here with us in Holland.
And they both love cars, and they're both inside playing with cars right now.
Yeah.
And they both benefit from hippotherapy, which is therapeutic horse riding. And I'll talk about Jonah, and then maybe you can talk about Siem. Jonah goes once per week to a farm nearby, and he's normally a very, very active child, always getting into things and running around and playing with stuff that maybe he shouldn't be playing with. Put him on a horse, we thought that he'd be afraid of this big animal. But these are specially trained horses that are very, very mellow. And so when he gets on the horse, he calms right down, and he sits, and he's relatively well focused. Yeah. And he rides, and he can steer the horse, and he interacts with the horse, and the horse, gives him feedback, and it's a very nice and gentle, calming experience for him and for us, actually, to watch him.
In the summer, he goes for a week. He goes to camp there during the day.
Okay.
And he really likes that.
Yeah. Siem also, it's almost the same story, but Siem is behavior like the horse is also a human. He knows the name, and he cuddles them and talks to them like they are people, and kisses and hugs. But when he's on the horse, he loves the feeling, the riding, and he gets very mellow, yeah. And that's nice to see, because Siem is also very active, and then he's loving it, yeah.
And they both seem like they need a lot of sensory input to keep themselves kind of calm. So they're moving all the time and jumping and very gregarious kids.
Okay.
A lot of structure. So he always knows what's coming. So it's bedtime is always the same, and bath and books, and we try to keep a very not strict, but we stick to the routine because he does better that way. So usually towards the end of the summer, it gets kind of hard. He really needs to go back to school to have that structure. So,
Well, with Siem is the same, but in Holland you get the 6 weeks of summer vacation, and in a couple of weeks he goes to a special club during the day. So he gets picked up by a bus and comes back later in the afternoon. And in the club they do games, activities like cooking or something like that, walking, going to a small amusement park. So when he comes back, it's the same routine as he goes to school. He comes back at 4 o'clock, and then we go walking with the dog. We got a dog, especially for Siem. We go walking with the dog, and then we go eating. He can watch some television or watch on the computer, and then he goes to bed. And even then, you have this strict routine.
Yeah.
Brush your teeth, go to read a book, or listen to music, and then he goes to sleep.
It's also the structure
Yeah.
that he needs it during the day. Everything must be the same routine, and then it's easier for him to understand what's the next step we are going to do. Otherwise, he will ask for it. When it's holiday, he will ask all the time, what are we going to do now?
Mm-hmm.
And he's not happy when there's no structure.
He gets bored.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
very nervous. He starts to scream, make noises, and run up and down. And at the end of the summer vacation, he asks for going back to school.
Yeah,
I want
That's
to go.
one difference. Jonah wants.
Jonah
Yeah, really.
does the same one.
Siem wants to go back to school to his friends.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What we found, just as an aside, is that as school has gotten harder, it's less play and more work.
yeah,
And so Jonah knows that, and that's one of the reasons that he really prefers vacations over school.
yeah,
But he gets used to it, and he's very adaptable. And he'll be unhappy the first day, and then the second day he'll say, "I love school."
yeah, yeah,
That's happened over and over again.
yeah,
But I think also in terms of schedule, I benefit from having a regimen, because then I say, it's been a tough day, but I know Jonah will be asleep by 8 o'clock in the
Yeah.
evening.
Yeah.
Done.
yeah,
Because we keep it so invariant, goes to sleep, and he's so used to it now, he's asleep in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then he can breathe a little.
You have some quiet time. The genetics doctor who diagnosed Jonah suggested that we come back every year or two. And we actually haven't been back because I think that we probably know the most about FOXP1 and where things are going. And so we haven't really been back. But Jonah gets speech therapy and occupational therapy, so for his fine motor skills, he gets that at school. And he goes to a public school, and he spends most of his time in a special needs class with other kids. It's usually like 3 grades together, so he's just getting ready to go to the middle school, so it'll be 4th, 5th, and 6th graders together. And then he goes to lunch, and he does like art class and PE with the mainstream kids, but he spends most of his time with that in that one class. So I'm trying to think what else.
Well, so we do see a specialist every 6 months now. She's a neurodevelopmental pediatrician, so she's not just a pediatrician,
Yeah.
and she's not a neurologist.
Yeah.
She's the two, and she has a lot of years of experience with kids that are having trouble developing. She has very little experience with FOXP1 because it's so new, and I think one of the challenges for us is that the way the science is happening now, there's like a new gene of interest every week.
yeah,
So now there's dozens of genes that are thought to be involved in different aspects of autism,
Yeah.
and hundreds of genes, and then it'll be thousands. And so there's really no way for the doctor to keep up with all of that information, and so it's on us to do that.
So we see that the neurodevelopmental pediatrician, we see her every 3 to 6 months, mainly for medications, which we struggled with for a long time, trying to find something that would help Jonah. So he takes one medication to help him with anxiety, and that works pretty well. And then we also see a behavioral psychologist who helps us deal with the behavioral issues that you can't really address with medication. So how to design a plan to handle a difficult behavior. When he was smaller, the anxiety was really kind of a problem for him. And then we also have tried a lot of medication, ADHD medications, which I think you said we don't feel like they help that much. They help maybe a little bit, but you know, we really want him to be able to learn, so we keep trying to find something that will help him with his concentration.
Yeah.
And then we also, the psychologist also helps Carl and I together too, just dealing with the stress of having a special needs child.
Sim is going to also a special school.
With
Yeah.
a learning disability. Yeah.
And he gets speech therapy there, and he gets
Occupational therapy.
occupational therapy.
How do you say in Dutch?
Ergotherapy. Yeah. And they're helping us a lot. They have good new ideas for Siem to because we say he needs a lot of running and laying on the ground for pressure or cuddling for pressure, and she has a nice place to do with Siem, so he gets his
Sensory diet.
Yeah.
sensory.
Yeah, so sometimes we call it
Yeah.
a sensory diet. So you need to have this much of this and this much of jumping and this much of that
Yes.
per hour.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
helps with it, so we can play with Siem, and that he gets it. And we have a woman. She comes into our house for 2 years. Also,
She comes in and talks about not only about Siem, but everything that keeps us busy. And what Annie says, keep the relationship stable,
yeah,
because it's not very easy to have a child with an FOXP1 or whatever disability, or so you keep the relationship strong.
yeah.
And she talks about Siem, she talks about our other sons, everything that keeps us busy, and she gives us advice.
About structure,
Yeah.
How to make new structure programs in the house, what's easy, also to make it work in the family.
So our diagnosis came in early 2013, and at that point there were only 1 or 2 papers that had been published on FOXP1, and those papers were the reason that the scientists were able to make the diagnosis, but it wasn't very much information. And so when we went online, we found that there was very little else known. So that was one of the reasons that we wanted to start the community, was to get to know other parents and get to know more about life as parents, individuals with a FOXP1 change, and what the future would hold for them.
It's almost the same when we looked on the internet, or what we heard about the genetic doctor. It was probably a little bit more than you had, because it was 1 year after it, but not very much. And then the genetic doctor advised to look on RareConnect. She has looked for it by herself, and she advised it to us. So that's the way we.
We got in contact with RareConnect.
Yeah.
We're the first family on there, but then I think every time we would get an email that somebody had joined, we'd get really excited to see, you know, what these other children were like. And it was very, I think, rewarding to read the stories and hear the similarities in the children. And for me, there were a few people who wrote back and said, you know, this is so amazing that I found this. We felt so alone. And that made it worth all the work to put together to finally get up with RareConnect and start the community. That meant a lot to me personally.
So I went and looked last night or the other night, and there are about 40 members, but of course most families have more than one member. So I think it's about 20 families. And the closest for us is, so we live in North Carolina. There's a family in South Carolina and a family around Washington, D.C. We haven't met them yet. Instead, we flew all the way over to Europe to meet a family.
Yeah.
And we've met a family from Canada.
Right.
Yeah.
We met them last year, and we're going to see them again
In a few weeks.
this year. And then it seems there's about half in the U.S. and Canada, and about half in Europe. So spread all over. And
Right.
and I think the youngest is probably
Less than a year.
she's probably 1 by now,
Yeah.
and the oldest is the person who's 21, I think. And for a while it seemed like a lot of boys, but it seems now that it's about half boys, half girls.
I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is that having a FOXP1 change is not, there are some characteristic things like intellectual disability and language problems, but then there's all these other things that some kids have and some kids don't have. Some kids have problems with bone development, other kids have problems with their digestive system. And so there's almost like subgroups, and a few parents who are having similar experiences connect up. And maybe for them it's very important to get some tips and ideas about how to help feed their children, very basic problems. And for other people, they're connecting up because their kids are having recurrent lung infections because they're breathing in their food, for example. And so it's very gratifying to see these individuals not only not feel alone anymore, but get very specific, good tips and tricks from parents who are having very similar experiences. So one of the things we're really looking forward to soon is to try to promote a disease registry that will bring together information about all the individuals that sign up voluntarily about their disease, their development, what other problems they might be having, so we can and what is their exact genetic diagnosis, because some kids have a mutation like Jonah, some kids have a deletion of the whole gene or more than one gene, and there's at least one child that has a duplication of FOXP1, so they now have 3 copies instead of 2. So there's all sorts of different things, and the question scientifically and clinically is, what is the range of challenges those children experience? What are effective therapies for those different things, and how does that map to a different genetic diagnosis? And that's very useful for researchers, but also for parents coming in with a new diagnosis. They can sort of look in and see where their children fall. So that's, I think, one of the easiest next steps. That's just a matter, it's not easy, but it's a matter of collecting the people, collecting blood samples, and collecting a psychological evaluation, the medical history and all that, and kind of getting it into a registry. And there are organizations that provide free online registry things, the website where you would have all the information available for searching. So all we need to do is to get people together and to collect the information. So right from when we first got the diagnosis, we started reaching out to the scientists, the authors of the publications, to try to connect through them to other parents. And that was what we were doing before we had RareConnect. But we still are, every time we find a new paper, we reach out to the authors and try to link up scientifically to help learn more about the disease or what their next steps might be. And we've also been able to leverage RareConnect. Other scientists have discovered RareConnect.
Oh, that's right. There's an immunologist from Louisiana who joined because he is taking care of a child who has FOXP1, and there's nothing out there. So he joined the site and started out, asking other parents whether they had, problems with infections. And so I thought that was really interesting that he reached out to us for information.
He's very engaged.
And I think he's getting ready to try and start a study to look at the immunological issues that might come from a FOXP1 change.
So yeah, it's not all about the development of the brain. FOXP1 is in every tissue, and some mutations in FOXP1 can affect development in the bone, in the gut, in the immune system, in the brain as well.